Dialectical behavior therapy was created in the 1980s by Marsha Linehan in Seattle, Washington.
Today, DBT is taught all over the world.
We're two therapists who believe everyone can benefit from DBT skills.
I'm Kate.
I'm Michelle.
And this is DBT and Me.
Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Welcome
everyone.
to Q&A number 11.
I know. It's like we've crossed the threshold of sorts.
I know we're into the double digits.
Yes,
Not
exactly.
just at, but into. But yeah, I think we've got 4 different things.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know. Shall we just launch right in?
Yeah, let's launch in. So I'm going to read the first one here. So this one says, which I edited it down a little bit, but you guys will still get the essence of it and what this listener is going through. So this one says, I am in very early stages of recovery, starting next week with a one-on-one therapist focused on DBT. I've recovered from an eating disorder and social anxiety, and so I'm familiar with using exposure therapy and long-term opposite action. But BPD, borderline personality disorder, is a whole new ballgame because lines seem grayer to me, and my black and white thinking is hindering my ability to maintain stable romantic partnerships. I struggle primarily with severe abandonment and attachment anxiety issues, which causes me to lash out and accuse people of not wanting to be with me, which, in the end, leads to that happening. All in all, I feel daunted by the fact that I need to catch my spirals early on. I'm hopeful that DBT will help me get there. A specific example I'm thinking of is my friend encouraged me to tell my partner how I'm feeling about some things. So I stayed up all night ruminating. She got my text at 6 a.m. and talked for 2 hours, at which point I bombarded her with 4 rather complex topics in a short period of time, in a rather accusatory way rather than curious. Looking back, I was doing the right thing by communicating my needs and concerns, something I struggle to do, but the intensity and way in which I did it was wrong. I worry about my ability to function when I'm in that state, in the event that I choose not to act on my impulse to speak with her. This is opposite action in parentheses there. At those moments, my skin is crawling, heart is racing, mind is obsessing in an unhealthy way, and the only way I can escape that feeling is by messaging, calling, talking, etc., and this can last for days and weeks. How do I function like this, i.e. focusing at work, etc.? In that specific situation, rather than speak with her, I needed to exit the spiral, get clarity, and then talk. However, I've never yet been successful in exiting a spiral. These spirals have always led to breakups. I had one which lasted months, and I'm going through another one now which is less intense but still a big issue. I'm so angry at myself for hurting other people. That said, with DBT in the picture, I'll likely learn better tools. I'm wondering what things you think I should focus on most as I begin my therapy. Based on what I know so far, interpersonal effectiveness and emotion regulation seem to be top candidates. I'm also on a waitlist for group therapy, as an FYI. That's the post.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's funny because when we were discussing this beforehand, I didn't even think about it, but while I am more than happy to suggest my ideas to you, listener, I also realize that as a therapist, I might take issue if someone came in and said, these 2 people from a podcast told me that these are the things that I should be focusing on first in DBT. So, I just want to put the disclaimer out there that, in all likelihood, your therapist might have a plan already.
Always listen to your therapist.
Yes. So, if your therapist has their way of what they want to focus on in what order or whatever, build that therapeutic relationship and don't listen to us over your therapist. So there you go. There's my disclaimer. But if I was if I was reducing that comment down enough, listener, to kind of get what you were looking for the most, it sounded like your biggest issues were with exiting your spirals, ideally earlier on, so that they get less in your way and also are less likely to cause you to make impulsive decisions that you then regret later, or engage in sort of compulsive actions that you regret later. So hopefully I got that kind of right. And my thoughts are, first and foremost, mindfulness. This may not come as a surprise to anybody that's been hearing me on this podcast so far, that mindfulness is a big part of my practice as a therapist, etc., and I'm really into it. But I do think that the observe, essentially, part of mindfulness can be really useful to this listener and anybody else that goes through similar things. It allows you to take that little bit of a step back out of your own experience, and that little bit of distance can often help with slowing things down, can often help with maybe exiting a spiral that you've found yourself really in the middle of. So yeah, first and foremost, I would recommend mindfulness, and however that looks to you. Ideally, you have heard or will go back and hear our mindfulness episodes where we go into it really in depth. But this can be mindfulness of your internal state, things in your external state. It can be just mindfulness of whatever action you're really engaged in. But if you're really present to the present moment, it's going to be a lot harder to be engrossed in those sort of mental spirals that it sounds like you're going through. So that's my first suggestion. The other one would be a check the facts. Not check the facts, would be check the facts. Which I think also could be, I feel like I'm saying this too much today, really useful. But, that we get into these, all right, maybe I shouldn't say we, but at least what I think of as spiraling, right, is getting really stuck in these sort of circles of our own suppositions and our own, what's the word I'm looking for, assumptions. And just sort of going down a rabbit hole where maybe at the very beginning, something was based on an actual fact, but after that, it's just our own brain fighting against itself, right? Well, I bet that they're thinking this way and they must be feeling that way. And right? And it's not factual anymore. And so bringing yourself back by doing either a formal check the facts, like there's available in DBT, or Michelle and mine's shortcut, which is just, what do you actually know? Right? Not what do you suspect, not what do you suppose, not what do you assume, not what's your best guess, not what, right? But what do you actually know about the situation? I think that also could be something that could help you get that little bit of distance between yourself and your own reaction, I guess, is kind of what I think of that as helping to provide. That being said, I think it sounds like you're doing a really excellent job of pushing your own buttons. Reader, I guess, is something that listener. I guess I do read posts on Facebook. Nope, there's no way I can make that work.
We are the readers.
I'm reading. My brain today, I don't even know. Anyway, we're outside events can certainly hit our buttons when it comes to emotions, right? Back in our Emotions 101, I think, episodes, I talked a bit about how emotions naturally last no more than 90 seconds, unless something is prompting that chemical response to happen again. And so if you're talking about being in these same spirals for days or weeks or even months, I can pretty close to guarantee that you are spamming your own buttons internally to keep yourself in that emotional state, right? So really, you're gonna need some distraction. This can look like a lot of different things. The accepts skill definitely has stuff that helps with distraction. Just in general, things that you can concentrate on that knock your brain off of the track that it's on in that spiral. This sounds like, just from how you describe your own experience, something you're going to have to do repeatedly. It's not going to be a one and done. You're really used to practicing the thought patterns wherein you stay with this thing kind of obsessively, it sounds like. And so you're going to have to distract again and again and again and again when your brain winds its way back to that topic, because it's used to this, right? This is what it's been taught. It's not your fault. It's not its fault. This is just where you are. And so the thing that you've rehearsed, essentially, is staying in these thought patterns. So your brain's going to naturally gravitate back to that over and over and over again, which is where the mindfulness, the checking the facts, and the distraction are all going to, I think, come in a bit of a rescue for you mentally. So those are my thoughts. What about you, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think there's lots of things that could be helpful for this listener. One of the things that stood out to me the most when I was reading it was kind of the vivid physical descriptions.
Yep.
Of like, my skin is crawling, heart is racing. I mean, you're feeling your emotions very strongly and very physically in your body. So I think everything that Kate is saying is spot on. And I also think it's important to make sure that when you're trying to exit this spiral, that you're going to have to do something to like physiologically get your body to have a different response.
Michelle and mine's answers probably ought to be chronologically reversed, I think is what Michelle's getting
like
to.
Do my stuff first and then your stuff?
Yes.
I guess that's true. Well, though, admittedly, first, you have to observe and be mindful and notice. So, mindfulness first, pretty much always. And then, you know, I guess from there, you know, one of the things I was going to recommend is the skill stop, which is, you know, such... It's a skill that doesn't have to take much time. It can be very hard to do. But basically, you know, listen to that episode if you haven't already. But the essence of it is that it really is you hitting the pause button. You may need to walk away from your phone. Like when you catch yourself starting to spiral, you may need to do that. Like actually stop, take a step back, and make sure that you're reducing the likelihood of you making an in the moment decision that you might regret later. So stop may be the next thing after observing and being mindful. And then, you know, Kate was talking about accepts as a way to distract. And one of the things that I thought of was the skill of tip, which really actually, Kate, if I super think about it, aligns with the sensations part of accepts.
Oh, absolutely. Yep, that's true.
The S in accepts can really encompass what the skill of tip is. So doing some of those tip things, whether that is using
and they're distracting.
They're very distracting.
Everything in tip is distracting.
Everything in tip is very distracting, and it's going to give you a physiological jolt that you might need when you're feeling it so physically in your body. So you may not always need to go to tip, but tip is a good thing to go to if you are really in a moment where you're basically having a panic attack, more or less. Tip can really help to calm your body down very quickly. So then you can do what Kate was talking about of checking the facts and being able to maybe make a choice from there. The other thing that I was thinking of also, because, you know, we recorded an episode about this pretty recently, is this skill of ride the wave. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a lot of what it sounds like you are trying to do and perhaps struggling with, is that when you're reaching your peak, when you are, you know, you are spiraling out of control, and you said that like the only way that you can escape that feeling is by messaging, calling, talking to that person, etc. I mean, that's your urge. That's what you want to do.
Surfing.
Yep. And that was actually a random example that I think I mentioned in the episode. Is sometimes this is how it looks. So you're having an urge and you're figuring out what to do with it. And that's where it can be helpful to turn to some distraction and tip to help you ride that wave and to get through that urge without doing the thing that the urge is telling you to do, which you might regret later on. So yeah, I think if you take what Kate said and take what I said and you mash it together, you get a pretty complete picture here of like, first observe and notice what's going on for you, being able to press the pause button essentially before you do anything, and maybe doing some tip or some accepts to help you get back into a wise mind place where you can check the facts. Because ultimately what's probably going on for you, listener, which is so common, it can look a lot of different ways, but at the end of the day, it sounds like, you know, your emotion mind runs the show in these moments. And we got to figure out how to get you back to a wise mind place where you can make decisions about what you're communicating that feels really good to you in the long run, rather than something that feels perhaps more impulsive, compulsive, that kind of a thing. So just be patient with yourself. You know, you're learning and trying something totally new. I think we say this all the time, Kate in particular, like, you're gonna fuck up. It's okay. Mm-hmm. Just keep coming back and trying again. So hopefully we've just given you some good material to test and try out. I feel like we gave a number of things. Skills. Hopefully it wasn't too overwhelming.
And I would say, I think just before we go on to the next one, that I think Michelle and I are both in a little bit of agreement of, well, you're talking about romantic relationships, and so it makes a lot of sense why you might think that like interpersonal effectiveness module type skills would be a good fit here. It sounds like your own internal state of being is the thing that's driving this, so I wouldn't go there yet, because that's more external, and it sounds like a lot of your distress and these spirals and the stuff that's really driving you is internal stuff. So I wouldn't start there.
Yeah.
Almost anywhere else.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's why Michelle and I teach it last. We think that it's like, deal with your own self first. I'm going to figure out all this external shit. So
exactly. Yep. Okay.
All right. On to the next one. This one says, I have been listening to this podcast for the last 2 weeks, and while I've only listened up to the ABC skill, I think DBT skills will help me greatly. My issue at the moment is that I get chest pains when looking at things I like online, such as different craft ideas, and I get dizzy and nauseated when walking through the stationery stores. I love stationery. I enjoy doing these things, but I get overwhelmed with all of the choices. I don't want to lose my interest, so I'm unsure what I should do.
Yeah, I also just realized, even though very different situation with the first one that we just read and this one, I mean, in both, the common theme is that there's this physiological reaction, right? Chest pains is what this listener is talking about. So, I mean, when I first read this, actually, listener, I felt like I related in some way. Craft stationery, not so much my thing. But I certainly have experienced similar things. For me, it shows up as a lot of ruminating. When I am considering things to do that I enjoy. And at first glance, for a lot of people, this might seem kind of counterintuitive. Like, you like this. Why is it stressing you out? Like, people might not get it. But you mentioned something at the end, which seems pretty spot on here, of when you say, I think I get overwhelmed with all the choices. And that is what happens to me sometimes too. I read a lot of different magazines. I watch a lot of different TV shows. And sometimes, if, as I put it, I get behind, I get a stack of magazines that accrues on my nightstand, or I'm like 5 episodes behind in all my shows, I get overwhelmed because I don't really know where to start. I don't really know where to begin. And so this thing that is meant to be really enjoyable and pleasurable and fun becomes this thing that kind of stresses me out, because I spend all my time thinking about, like, well, which show should I watch, or which magazine should I read, or, you know, should I be watching shows or reading magazines, because I have so much to do on both. So it's a thing that I've struggled with a little bit too. So that could be a potential reason for you, like you said, is that you're overwhelmed with all the choices. Also, you might just be putting pressure on yourself to make the best or the right choice. There's actually, I don't know, Kate, maybe you remember like the psychology term for it. There's something about with our brains, like it's less stressful, if we think about it with ice cream, it's less stressful to just have to choose between chocolate, vanilla, or strawberry than it would be to walk into like a Baskin Robbins with 31 flavors. It's less stressful for our brains to have fewer choices than it is to have more. And there's some kind of term for it.
I know, but I don't remember it either.
But I can't remember. So that may be what's going on.
It's not decision paralysis, is it?
I mean, I feel like that fits.
It could be it.
Of just like, yeah, we're faced with these things. We like them all. How can we pick? It can very much happen. And I don't know, another thing that came up for me reading what you wrote is that it's also possible, because I know I certainly anyways experience this as well, and maybe you do too, of like, sometimes I can get really hard on myself when it comes to like, just an enjoyable activity, like telling myself that I shouldn't be doing it at all because I have other more important things to get to. And so there can be this very like critical adult voice, you could say, or this part of me that's more or less just kind of like, you know, you have other things to get to. Don't worry about that right now. And so maybe that's a possibility of what's coming up for you a little bit too, is that when you let yourself look at craft projects online or walk through the store and look at stationery, you know, there could be this other part of your brain that's coming in just kind of being like, how dare you even think about this stuff? Like, you have other things to be worrying about or doing instead, and then that also is going to take away from your enjoyment of it and bring up anxiety too. So those were a couple of my thoughts. And then Kate had some ideas about what can you actually do about this? Like, regardless of what the reason is, which I can speculate about all day long, regardless of what the reason is, you know, this isn't the reaction that you want to be having.
Yeah.
So Kate has some thoughts on what you can do instead, maybe.
Yeah. So my first thought, and I do think this one is a little bit later. What is that in emotion regulation? Isn't that in emotion regulation?
Distress tolerance.
God damn, everything I ever think is emotion regulation is distress tolerance. I don't know why I don't get this right after
I get
many years of teaching them. Anyway, wherever it is, I actually think effective rethinking and paired relaxation, if you haven't gotten to it yet, would be a really good episode to listen to for what you're going through. What it does in a nutshell is when you know something, you know you have a certain kind of response to something. So in your case, it could be, you know that when you look online at different craft stuff, you have this response. So what you do is you end up pairing a different way of thinking about it with relaxation techniques, of basically breathing techniques, to help you basically train your body differently about how to respond in that situation. It does require practice, like you actually have to do a thing.
Yeah,
so repeatedly you have to spend some time. Yeah, this is a preparatory thing, not so much an in the moment thing. This is something to do to try and look ahead and prevent this from happening in the future rather than dealing with it in the moment. So that's one limitation, I guess, of it. Also, I was thinking about the stop skill. I know when I was talking to Michelle about it, I was like, but soft stop, which I think of stop as being, I don't know, sometimes really like, stop!
Yeah, like you're in the moment, it is going left, you need to pump the brakes real quick and change course.
Whereas I think of what maybe might help for you is just a little bit like, hang on a second. Mm-hmm. How can I go about this differently? Right? And that's really what, I don't know, everything that I'm going to suggest is a form of, or helps to support, is a pause and a reapproaching from a different kind of place, right? So Michelle was speculating on some ideas. I'm sure there are even more possibilities for why this, might be happening to you. But what you don't want to do is just keep putting your body through having the same response over and over again, because then your body will learn that that's the appropriate response. So all of these are different ways to try to prevent or short circuit that response cycle so it doesn't come to completion every time. Things to start teaching your body, we can be in this situation and not be experiencing this distress, right? Try and break the causal link between those two things. So effective rethinking and paired relaxation was one idea. The stop skill, but maybe with a little bit more gentleness. Yeah, gentleness, self-compassion than it might sound like. And then just plain old mindfulness, right? Going into it and just trying to be in a wise mind place, trying to be bringing your mindfulness skills, being present to just what is, right? Instead of future tripping or past tripping, right? Just being present and being present and being non-judgmental. So yeah, hopefully some of those are helpful. Keep listening also, because, Michelle and I have our ideas for what we think is best, but also you might just keep listening to stuff and stumble upon something that is more helpful to you because it addresses more specifically what you are going through. So if our mind reading has been poor, we still hope you can find something that ends up being helpful.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. The next one says, Dear Michelle and Kate, I was listening to your Q&A episode 10 yesterday, and I really appreciate how you explained the last question about oversharing. While I completely understand your explanation, and I will try to incorporate it in my life, my question is, what do we do when the person in front of us is opening up and is sharing their life secrets with us? At that moment, it's very difficult to not overshare. You know it's not the right thing to do because, of course, it can be, as Kate said, scandalous, but you feel this urge to share your things with them as well, even when you know it's not the right thing to do. And then it leads to trouble later. I'd really appreciate your advice on this. Thank you.
So, I don't know. The first thing that I thought was oversharing is contextual. right? A lot of, it's not, I don't know, some things are, I don't know, oversharing in one context that just absolutely wouldn't be oversharing in another. Some of how we gauge that is, what other people are doing towards us, how they're feeling towards us. So I'm not saying this is the case, but it might be the case that in the scenario you're describing, listener, it's not oversharing. Like, if you're comfortable hearing that person open up with you about their life and telling you their secrets, if that feels comfortable to you and you feel the urge to reciprocate because it sounds like that's where that relationship is, or it feels like that's what's appropriate to the situation, I guess I wanted to say it might be okay, right? Like, not, I don't know, just contextually, there are things that are in no way scandalous for me to share with Michelle because we're good friends, but would be abso-fucking-lutely scandalous for me to share with the person standing behind me at the grocery store. It's not one size fits all, right? For what is inappropriate or what counts as oversharing. So don't automatically assume, I guess, that because something is deep or because something, is profound, that it's automatically oversharing. Do take a look at the context. And again, if everyone's comfortable, if you're comfortable hearing from them and they're giving the signals that they're comfortable hearing from you and that just feels where you're happy. I don't know. My first thought, and it might sound a little bit flippant, hopefully not too much, was, oversharers unite. Like, sometimes people are just comfortable being in that rhythm with each other. And if you found another person who's like you in that regard, then that's fine, right? You don't have to shit on yourself just because it's not the overarching cultural norm. Now, just because someone is sharing a lot with you and that makes you feel like you ought to share back, but you don't want to, that's a whole different situation, and that's more what Michelle is going to tackle. But I just wanted to say that if you're comfortable hearing from them and it feels like you're comfortable giving in return, then that very well could be okay. Because so much of what determines oversharing is the context in which it's being done, who this person is, how much they've already shared with you, etc. So it's not a hard and fast line. Hopefully that makes sense and is helpful.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree with you. It's totally one of those things where it's like, if you're comfortable and that other person is comfortable, green light. More or less, yeah. And some people might argue like, ooh, I've gotten myself into trouble before because somebody was sharing a lot with me and I was sharing a lot with them. And then everything just moved very quickly in that relationship, whatever type of relationship it was. Sure, that can happen. And also, I think really what you're getting at, Kate, is that like there's not a right or a wrong.
Yeah.
Sometimes people get close very quickly. Sometimes it takes two other people a long time to establish that rapport and that closeness. So there isn't really a right or wrong when it comes to opening up and sharing. It's just whatever people are comfortable with. So, yeah, wanted to just kind of validate that. And also, my thoughts were that kind of how I read into this is that if this is a situation where somebody's oversharing and you're maybe, there's like this part of you that wants to overshare, but there's like, or to talk, but there's this maybe wise mind, other bigger part of you that's like, ooh, I don't actually know if I feel comfortable sharing. Like, I don't know if I want to share that. Like, I can tell that I'm getting pulled that way, but it's not what I really want to do. Like, I don't really want to share. That was my sense of things reading this. So basically, I kind of thought of two different scenarios and two different skills. So it's one of those things where you may not want to share, but perhaps the person who is, let's say, oversharing, if we want to use that term, that you're fine with them. Like, you're not feeling uncomfortable by what they're sharing. You're just sensing within yourself, I don't know if I want to be sharing as much as they are. But okay, if they want to share, I'm open to listen. Like, I'm okay with them sharing with me. Then really practicing give as the skill to go to here. And give is great because when you're being really intentional about using give, you are putting essentially the spotlight and the focus on the other person. being really gentle and acting interested in what they have to say, being validating and using an easy manner. Like, you're really showing up and being this compassionate presence for them with what they are sharing. So if you are comfortable with them sharing with you and you just don't want to share too much yourself, try out some give, because that will hopefully help this person feel connected, heard, validated by you, without you feeling like you have to start divulging in return if you don't want to do that. So that's the first scenario. The second scenario, though, which again, we're just going off of what we know in this post, but there could be another scenario going on where someone is oversharing with you and you do not feel comfortable with it. Like, you are ready for this conversation to end. You are not comfortable with the things that they are saying, and you are not wanting to share your stuff either. You're just not really sure what to do in those moments, because those moments can be really awkward and really uncomfortable. And I have been there, and maybe many other people have been there too, where I'm just kind of like, oh, I think I've mentioned before on the podcast, I was a cashier at a grocery store for a few years, and boy, I got some life stories, things that I did not want to know and I wasn't really comfortable hearing, especially in that context. As Kate mentioned, context is everything. So in that case, if that's what's going on, like you are really wishing that they were not sharing as much as they were, then fast may be a skill to go to instead. And arguably, this may be really awkward and really hard and really challenging to do, especially if fast is just a skill that you struggle with. It could be a hard one. But again, we want to be truthful and we don't want to apologize. So we don't want to necessarily make up some excuse that isn't true. And also, how do we curtail the conversation? So this gets tricky. But, let's say, I'm just thinking of the example I just gave. Let's say I'm at work and someone's trying to chat my ear off as I'm in the check stand. I could have said something like, hey, I appreciate you sharing with me, and I also really need to get back to work and focus on the next customer. I hope that you have a good day. You could say something like that. If there is a genuine, honest thing, an opening to leave the conversation, you can try to do that. That's asserting your fast skills. You can also maybe say something like, I recognize that we're just meeting each other, and even though I would like to learn more about you, especially if this is someone you're going to be seeing maybe on a regular basis, to also maybe say, and those are things that maybe I would like to hear more about later instead of right now, where I don't feel ready to learn about that part of your life, or, whatever it may be. These are really generic. Find your own words, make it relevant to the context and the person that you're saying this to, but figuring out some way to try to more or less say to them, that's all I want to know. And you don't really want to hear too much further. You can do that too. So it really depends on a lot of different factors, what you feel comfortable with, and all of that is really gonna be a big factor what choice you make.
I like it.
Yeah. Okay, I think the last one.
Last one. Okay. This one says, "Hi, Michelle and Kate. I am so happy to have found your amazing podcast. Thank you. I am the mother of a BPD daughter. I am finding the skills and tools amazing. They are helping me with many aspects of my life, not only at home with my family. I have been sharing some of these skills with my team at work. Everyone is having fun and also finds DBT, as you feel, good for everyone. The issue I'm having is that my daughter, age 27, keeps promising me that she will get involved in DBT, but she has yet to make the effort. She does talk to her therapist and psychiatrist regularly, both of which highly recommend her to focus on DBT. How can I encourage her to get the help she truly needs and enroll and actually do the work?"
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that came to mind for me, which I was like, man, that's not really helpful though, is the whole thing about like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. I mean, it's true. Your daughter has to want it. for herself and wanted enough to take the steps. And it may be that even if, you're recommending it, her therapist and her psychiatrist are recommending it, if she's not wanting it enough internally, it's not going to happen. So, in terms of, but I think what you said, and I'll use your verbiage here, how can I encourage her? Right? Like, not make her, not force her, but how can I encourage her? And one of the things that I thought about, which I don't think it would probably really work to do this in the typical way that we think of doing pros and cons. Like, I don't know your daughter. I don't know how she would respond if you were like, let's do this worksheet together. I don't know if that'd go over so well. But I actually do think the skill of pros and cons, DBT style, could be helpful here for you to do, and trying to put yourself in her shoes, right? She's your daughter. My guess is that you know her pretty well. You have a sense of her personality, her likes and her dislikes and things like that. And that you could maybe do a pros and cons worksheet from her perspective. Thinking about for her, what she would think would be the pros of doing DBT, the cons of doing DBT, the pros of not doing DBT, and the cons of not doing DBT. What would she think? How would she answer those questions if you gave it your best guess and your best shot? Because that might help you get more insight into why she hasn't done it yet, despite being urged by so many people in her life to do it. So that might help you put a different spin on it, and then maybe addressing it with her slightly differently. One of the things that, this is a therapeutic technique, so I'm not saying, therapize her or anything like that. You're not her therapist. But there's this modality that therapists use called motivational interviewing. And it's been found to be really effective when people are struggling with a behavior that they want to change, whether that's like addiction, or they're wanting to eat healthier or go to the gym or whatever it is. And basically it really takes this non-judgmental stance where you do essentially really look at the pros and cons. What are the things that you get when you don't go to the gym? Oh, well, when I don't go to the gym, then I have more time to watch movies, Then I get to sleep in a little bit more. Then I get to, look at all the reasons for why you're not doing the thing. Mm-hmm. It's really important to look at that side in order to then get a more fuller grasp of why this thing is not happening.
Like a balanced view. Very
balanced. Yeah, exactly. That's the goal of it, is to really, again, without judgment, but just to look at really both sides of that coin. And it may be with your daughter that you're then able to kind of validate, I can see maybe why you haven't wanted to do DBT up until this point. Why it hasn't happened yet. I can actually see that because she doesn't want to give up an evening of her week to do a 2-hour group, or, whatever it is. And then when you can actually see those reasons, then you can make your efforts to talk with her about this a little more personal, because she might feel more validated by you, more understood by you, if you're able to understand better her reasons for not doing it. And then once we know our reasons for why we're not doing a thing, then we can start to overcome those reasons. So like if somebody's not going to the gym because they think, I have to do it in the morning before work and I don't want to get up early. Well, do you have to? Can we find another part of the day? So then that doesn't become a drawback for you, sort of a thing. So that's what I would recommend, is maybe for you to take some time with the pros and cons skill and see if that changes your perspective at all with trying to talk to her about this.
I like it.
Thanks.
My thoughts were, similar. I think Michelle and I, apparently both of us had the same knee-jerk reaction of, oh, Mom, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
You can't make it happen. But the ways that I thought might help too, as Michelle was talking about using your verbiage of encouraging her, is maybe you're already doing this, but if you're not, maybe sharing with her the way you've been sharing with your coworkers, right? Bring your personal experience and your excitement to the equation. Be like, look, I just learned this. This is how this is helping me. This is what, like keeping it focused on you so she doesn't necessarily feel pressured or shamed, but still giving her an amount of access to the information, and, I don't know, showing her how positive of an impact it can have, might help to nudge her motivation a little bit higher up than it is right now. The other thing, and this one is really broad, is a lot of the reasons that people don't do the work, as you put it, is a sense of embarrassment or shame or, lack of self-worth. Either they're not worth their own effort, or they're too fucked up to even help, so why bother to try, or, right? Like, there's a lot of, negative self-reflection, a lot of different ways that can take shape that get in the way of, facing our shit one way or t'other. So, while totally non-specific to this thing, you can also probably help her be more willing to do this kind of hard thing just by working on bolstering her self-esteem rather than focusing on her issues. It can be really tempting when we have someone that we love to just be like, look, don't you see all these ways that your life could be better? Don't you see all these things that you're doing to hurt yourself? I just care about you so much. I just don't want to see these issues eat up your life, whatever, right? This very well-intentioned, very loving way of accidentally rubbing their face on everything they're fucking up, right? Because we're like, don't you see, right? That frustration can lead to us really focusing on the negatives. So I would say that more generally speaking, both in sharing with her about DBT in a really positive fashion, stuff that makes it sound positive, exciting, accessible, helpful, etc. But also focusing on her goodness. Well, it might seem like, well, how is telling her that she's fine the way she is supposed to help her face her issues? And that I take months to try and explain to clients when I'm trying to do it to them. So I will just say, too long I cannot sum up other than to say people do harder work when they feel better about themselves. So
it's positive reinforcement. When you praise something, someone's more likely to do it again. And my guess is, and maybe this is just because Kate says it's my superpower, you mentioned that she is going to therapy regularly and all of that. Hopefully, she is already making some changes in her life, making progress in some way. And even if it's not under the umbrella of DBT, she may be using some DBT skills and not even know it.
Sneakily.
Yeah, she may be effectively distracting herself when she's having a hard day. She may be making wise mind choices. She may be
self-soothing. I know a lot of people come around that from different ways. Different therapists come around to different self-soothing stuff.
Yep. A lot of DBT, people are always surprised when they go through our groups. They're like, oh, I'm doing that already. Yeah, probably, because DBT is not as inaccessible as people think. It takes a lot of work, but it's something where she may be doing some of it and not even know it. And so that may be something for you as well as her mom to just take a mental note of for yourself of okay, maybe she's practicing DBT and she might not even know it. Okay. That's a good sign or something.
That's something you can point out, hey, you're already doing this stuff. How cool is that?
Yeah, totally. Okay. That's it. We made it through. So, like with a recent episode we had, these all came from our Facebook groups. If you're part of the Facebook group, we absolutely encourage you to post if you have questions or concerns about any of the skills. You can get feedback from Kate or I. You can get feedback from other group members. So we absolutely encourage you to post questions in the Facebook group if you have them. If you're not part of the Facebook group or it just feels better to you to email us, we love that too. So you can email us at dbtmepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll be back with another Q&A hopefully pretty soon.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Always good.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
To learn more about us and the DBT skills we're teaching each week, join our Facebook group. Simply log in